Hi, I'm Mike with bootsbybohemond.com. Welcome to Shop Night, where I make a gift for a deserving person in our community. Tonight is part 3 of Brigitta's tall Cavalier boot project. If this is the first video you found, please go here to get to part 1, or part 3 won't make any sense to you. Now, part 3 is making the vamp. It's the most complex part of the pattern because it uses so many of the measurements and all the information that we've gathered from making our heel piece and our midsole into account while building it. So follow along. Make sure you have your parts out from part 1 and part 2 ready to go. Here we go. Let's make a vamp. The vamp is going to use the most amount of measurements from other pieces. The information we need is A, which is the measurement over the instep where the ankle or the foot meets the leg. Our B measurement, which is between the A and C, and it falls arbitrarily there, so it's just a measurement we take, but we knew where we took it. And then we have C, which is the knuckle to knuckle, or the widest part of your foot, and this is the measurement again over. And then E, which is the circumference of the instep to bottom of heel, which wrapped around and came up, which is 13 1/4. And then the information that we need also from this piece is that we chose 6, a 6 count using the system that I'm teaching you for the heel. Then the side of the heel piece is 3 + 2 right here, and that the length, the measurement from hole to hole is 7 3/4. So 7 3/4 right here. And that is the information that we need to make this vamp, which covers the toes. So the first thing I'm going to do is incorporate A, which is 8 3/4 to 8 1/8. Sorry, 8 3/8. The 8 3/8 was the right foot, and this was the left foot. So I want to come in between those two because leather is pliable and stretches. So for this measurement, I like to add, and for this measurement, I'm going to add 3/4. Right? I'm going to add 3/4. So that's going to make this measurement effectively. Taking a quick look at it, it's going to make this measurement approximately 9. So we're just going to make it 9. And theoretically, when I get down to my 7 count hole, because this measurement fell, if we take a look here, between 7 and 8. So if I were to measure from my 7 and 8 hole, and I'll show you how I got there, when I measure that, we'll try to hit that plus 3/4 because it's a full enclosed boot. With shoes, it's definitely a smaller number to add, but I'm going to be adding 3/4. Now to the B and the C measurement, I'm not going to add anything at all when I set those up because I want the boot to be snug there, but I need to give the person room to get in. So this is where arbitrary curves and lines come in. So I'm going to arbitrarily start curving some lines. Just tracing, and I'm going to spin the paper so don't get dizzy. And the first question you might ask yourself is, Mike, why did you draw this with a round or pointed toe? And my answer is, when I'm doing the squared toed boot, I want to have some puff up over the toes or some extra room. I don't want the leather ramping into the toes at an aggressive angle, putting pressure on the toes. So I'm going to go ahead and make it round, knowing that that's my gig, and that it'll cause this to go up, because what's important is, again, that the hole counts match and I can put different shapes together, so I can basically put more room in the toes, making it a rounded point. So we know from when we did my midsole that the center is 17, so I'm going to start counting 17, and now I'm going to reverse count my way down the sides. Now, when I'm doing this, I always add for the first 4 holes an extra millimeter. So that hole should have fell here, but I'm going to put it here. And I'm going to add an extra millimeter. I now know that I want this line here, so I'm going to erase. And there's going to be a lot of erasing and moving of things now, because we have to make these arches fit. There's no guarantee that the arches I drew work. We're assuming that they work until we confirm them with our measurements. So we're just going to use this arch. So I'm going to add a millimeter, 16, add a millimeter, 15, and add one more millimeter, 14. Now, as I come down the sides, there's some important lessons. And that is that my C measurement, the first one I'm going to hit, happens between 11 and 12. So I'm going to mark on the inside 12. On the outside, I'm going to mark 11. And that distance has to be my C measurement, which is 6 1/4 to 6 1/8. So 14, 13, 12, and I'm going to put an X. 60, I'm going to add again 3 times. I'm going to add 1 extra millimeter. 14, 13, and I'm just guessing where these holes go. 12 and 11. So I'm going to put an X on 11 and 6 and 1/4 is where I was headed, and I am at 6 1/4, but I'm a little long. So this is where we start moving stuff in. So I'd really like this hole to be here. So I'm going to now erase a bunch of stuff. And draw a new arch. Wide toes. She's got wide toe box, you know, it's to state that she's got feet like Barney Rubble is not an insult, it's just a fact. It doesn't impinge upon her as a person, but I need to add more room. So I'm going to go ahead and add some more room as I take a look. It'll just move the holes around a little bit. Whenever I change my arch, I'm going to change the hole locations because where the circumference or the outside perimeter changes, it changes the distance. So add a millimeter, 16. I'm going to add a millimeter, 15. I'm going to add a millimeter, 14. And now I'm going to use the straight technique of where the 5th tine would fall for my 20 millimeters. Ooh, it came right out perfect. Don't know how that happened. All right, let's try it on this side. Add a millimeter. I'm going to add a millimeter. I'm going to add a millimeter. And then I'm going to play it straight from here on, where I'm going to use standard spacing of 20 millimeters. Once again, I'm going to measure my 12 to my 11, which is my C measurement. And I come in perfectly at 3/16, 6 3/16. So my C is good and confirmed. So let's work now to my backwards to my B measurement. And my B measurement, we can see, falls between 10, 11 and falls right on the 9. So we're going to be shooting for 7 to 7 1/8. Now this measurement is never going to hit perfect because we've already added 3/4 to the other one. So between 11 and 10, I'm going to make an X, and on this side it's 9, so I'm going to go 11, I'm going to go 10, and I'm going to go 9. So this is a check to make sure that it's not too narrow or that it's not too far off. In this case, I am getting straight up 7 and looks like 3/8 7 3/8 is really close to the 1/8, so that will be fine because it can't be perfect. It just can't. This is an arbitrary measurement. We just want to make sure we're close. So this is B, and we've already transferred the A measurement plus our extra material for getting inside. So our E measurement is really important once again, because if any part of the boot is smaller than this measurement, you can't get in it. Now, if you were to like put a zipper down the side and cut it sideways open, you sure could get in if the boot was smaller than this. But because this is a closed boot, it's going to be that historical Cavalier boot, we have to add a little bit of room so that the foot can come in. So we know that on generally women, it's 3/4. On men, I'm going to add an inch. So for myself, I'm an 11. I'm going to add an inch. She's a women's 8, so I added 3/4. That's an arbitrary, from experience kind of number. So we can see my hole count. So we're going to keep reversing my hole count now down the sides of the leather. So this is a 9, and this is an 8, and this is a 7, and that's a 6. Remember, this is here is actually just the edge. We know where the edge is going to be. So this is our 6. Once again, 6 is because that's what we picked on our midsole. So our vamp will now wrap around to where we selected. So 8, 7, and 6. So what I'd like to do is draw lines and continue that line down past the 6. Now, I knew that Brigitta was going to fit on this 8.5 by 11 piece of paper. If I was making like a pair of boots for like somebody with a 15 or a 14 or a 13, I'm going to tape extra material down here when I do the toe, and it'll actually go over, and it won't really fit on an 8.5 by 11. Brigitta's foot is pretty much as close as one can get to an 8.5 by 11. So when we made our heel, we did design it so that when it's up against the midsole, that it's 90 degrees from the walking surface. So this angle is 90 degrees. I now need to also make this 90 degrees. So that's why I extended my lines, and I'm just going to roughly use my ruler as such to make a 90 degree line. Again with my quarter seam allowance. The next piece of information is, because this vamp, which goes over the toes, is going to hook up to this heel, is that I'm going to transfer that 3 plus 2 to our pattern. Because that is a piece of information up here that the side equals 3 plus 2 using my hole count system, and another quarter. 3, 1, 2, 3, plus 1, 2. Next step on our vamp is to interpret the E measurement. So E equals 13.25. That's both right and left feet. The length from the heel piece that we just discussed is 7 3/4. So in order to make this no less than our E measurement, it needs to be 5 1/2. From experience with these Cavalier boots, I'm going to arbitrarily add 1 inch, making it 6 1/2. All I do is I take my tape measure, and I don't know if you can see this really clear, but I'm going to try. And that is I'm going to wrap from the hole, last hole here, to the last hole here, 6 1/2. And then I'm going to flatten this out a bit, and then I'm going to make a line. And I'm going to rotate this so I can work on it a little bit easier. So this is a fun part where I'm going to use arbitrary curves again. I'm going to first start off a line that is in parallel with this line. So I'm going to go at least an inch, 1.5 inches, depending on the pattern, but at least an inch, going parallel with this line. I now need to do an arch that does something like this. And then I'm going to use my eraser to clean up all those pencil scratches so that you can see clearly what I've done. I messed around for a few seconds to straighten out this curve a little bit. I I'm working sloppier than normal because I'm talking to you all as opposed to just focusing on what I'm doing. So there's some sloppiness going on, and so that's that. So basically I'm seeing if both sides are symmetrical. Now one of the things you can do is you can say, like, I got this half correct. I theoretically could do the snowflake thing, right? Just fold it in half and make a mirror image of that piece and cut it out and don't have to stress about it. But I'm going to go ahead and count it out. And what I have is I've got the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and plus 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, plus 2. And that is how I incorporate the E measurement into making the vamp. So that was everything you needed to know. It is normal to widen or change your arches and to play with it and scratch and draw and erase and stretch and draw and erase using this technique. But it works. It works, and it takes a little bit of time. I generally take about an hour to do a pattern if it's hard, and about 30 minutes if it's easy. I don't make the heel piece each and every time. I will use the same heel piece for, like, let's say women's like 7 to 8s, 9s. I'll use the same heel piece over and over again, so I don't generate it with each pattern. I will generally only do the midsole and the vamp for each pattern once I've made more than one pair of shoes that's for the same approximate size person. So this is Brigitta's vamp. We have our vamp pattern to cover the toes, and we have our heel pattern, and I have lined up these strips of paper to be the buckle straps. So let's talk about them one at a time. This strap, this is approximately where the hole for the tongue of the buckle to come out. It's going to get folded over and put behind such that these holes that get punched will also get punched on this side, so that it's completely locked down and it won't fail ever during the wearing process, because it's going to be reinforced. So that's why it is at this length, which is approximately, taking a quick look, about 2.5 inches. Now let's take a look at the long strap. Now I'm measuring again from the hole, because that's where my measurements are. So on the vamp, we knew that this had to be 6 1/2. We knew that from the E measurement, and so we needed to repeat that on this. So I have made this tongue 7 1/2. And the reason why is that this has an inch. This is going to stretch quite a bit just in the tightening, so I'm going to get an extra 1/2 to 3/4 of an inch, just cinching it down, because it's a single piece of 5/8. The reason why this is 5/8 wide, 7/8 wide and 7/8 wide is because I'm going to use a 7/8 buckle when I make the boot. If I'm using a 1-inch buckle, these will be 1 inch wide. If I'm using a 1.5 inch buckle, these will be 1.5 inch wide. I wouldn't suggest going any lower for a boot, which is what this pattern is for, than 5/8, maybe 3/4. But after that, the strap will become too unstable, and you could definitely double up your leather here and solve that problem, but then feeding it through the smaller buckle will be tough because it's going to be extra thick. So we have our completed vamp, and this ends part 3. So make sure you do that by subscribing, liking, and sharing. It really helps. Next, we're going to move on to part 4, where we build the upper and tall part of the boot. That's going to be rather complex, and frankly those pieces don't fit well in the camera. And here's the big sell. Part 4, at the end of it, you get to see the completed boot project that this pattern built. So stay tuned for part 4.